Hello again. Essay here. A long time ago, Leslie Nielsen, yeah, that Leslie Nielsen, he once said that man needs laws and religion. Otherwise, he starts behaving like a wild animal. And I, I concur. But sometimes humans misbehave. Sometimes a little, sometimes a lot. For example, in the aftermath of the death of Julius Caesar, the people of Rome went a little crazy and destroyed the homes of Brutus and Cassius, since they're the ones who were more or less to blame for Caesar's death. And then, of course, there were other incidents in the past, like the evil May Day riots that happened in Britain during the 16th century, when people basically went a little crazy because they thought there was too many Flemish living in their midst. But of course, they had some curious ones as well, such as the bread riots that happened in Boston during the early Revolutionary era. But of course, that had to do with basically people being angry over the fact that bread was costing too much. And people were basically doing a little fancy dance with the prices, since that was occurring around the same time as the Queen Anne's War. And you say, who the fuck is Queen Anne? She was the ruler of Britain at the time. But anyway. But then there was some truly horrific riots that happened in the past, such as the St. Bartholomew riots that happened in France during the 16th century. Now that one was really bad. How bad? Well, according to historical records, when the riot was over, the Seine River that goes through Paris was red with blood. And it was believed that at least 30,000 people were killed. Yeah, pretty bad. But of course, here in the United States, we're no slouches. Nope, no siree. Because we had some pretty bad riots here too, such as the New York City draft riots that occurred during the Civil War. Of course, we didn't have like thousands of dead, but yeah, people got killed. And then, of course, there was the Haymarket riots, which, strangely enough, that was part of a much larger incident called the Great Upheaval, which, according to the history books, it was a series. It was a series of labor strikes and riots that was occurring all throughout the Northwest, from Baltimore all the way to Chicago, from the 1870s to the 1880s. But the Haymarket riots is where it reached its peak. And then, of course, how many people can remember Bloody Sunday? And no, I'm not talking about the U2 song either, even though that song is about a riot that happened in Ireland. But of course, then you say which one, because according to the history books, they had two Bloody Sundays in Ireland. One happened in Derry in 1972, and another one happened in Dublin in 1920. But of course, one of the biggest Bloody Sunday incidents occurred in Russia in 1905. Now that one was really bad, because even though the Russians didn't keep good records, it's presumed that somewhere between 500,000 people were killed. And for what? Well, according to the history books, a priest, I can't remember his name now, but all he wanted to do was deliver a petition to the Tsar. And apparently the Tsar wasn't interested in seeing this man's petition. So he sent his Cossacks, the soldiers out there, and basically, removed the petitioners. Well, they removed them all right, tried to kill every last one of them. So there you go. Now talk about a riot control Russian style. But probably the most horrific of all riots that ever occurred in human history happened in India during the partition. Now that one was about as bad as you can get. How bad? Well, according to the official records, it's estimated that somewhere between, are you ready? 500,000 and 2 million people wiped out. I tell you, when those Hindus get busy, they don't fuck around, do they? Nope. But and as for myself, I actually lived through a couple of riots. I was a wee little kid during the Watts riots in '65, and of course the '92 riots that happened later on. But this video is not about historical riots. No, this video is about one particular riot. And that's the one that happened in Minnesota back in 2020. And before you can say George Floyd, yeah, that's right. But before we go any further, first, I have to sell you something. Do you find that internet porn and OnlyFans isn't what's cracked up to be after all? Do you feel that the whole world has gone crazy and you just want it to go away and leave you alone, and you have no way of making it happen? Well, guess what? I got a deal for you. Hello there, SA here. And when I'm not making a fool of myself saying what I really think on a computer, I'm also a published author, and I got a deal for you. Glitch, a precarious duo, and Glitch, the future is unwritten. And right now, they're both on sale for 99 cents. That's right, no bullshit. And the sale is good through Black Friday. That way, if you're too bloated with turkey, it's okay. You can wait an extra day to blow your money. Now, I'll give you the quick elevator pitch. That way I won't bore you with the details. Sandra is a 15-year-old fashion model with a lot of problems. And Ike, he's a Gulf War veteran who is the last man standing after a deadly jewel heist. But the two of them, through a quirky set of circumstances, end up on a journey across the Southwest while John Law is pursuing both of them. Now, I'm not some one-hit wonder. I got other books coming down the pike. So if something mysterious doesn't fall out of the sky on my head, you'll be seeing those books too. Now let's get back to the video. Okay, now we got that little bit of business out of the way. Now, George Floyd. What can you say about George Floyd? Well, one thing you can say about him that he wasn't a good dude. Nope, he certainly wasn't. He wasn't a nice guy. In fact, back when I was growing up, they would call someone like George Floyd a three-time loser. Which is true. I mean, let's not even pretend, okay? Uh, However, that riot didn't have to happen. Nope. No siree. And you know why? Because you had a confluence of events where A, you had an unfortunate Mr. Floyd who died, and you had a cowardly and incompetent political leadership in Minnesota who basically said, you know what, we're not going to fight the mob. We are going to feed the mob. And of course, anyone who's old as I am has probably heard the old joke about feeding the crocodile. The presumption is that if you sacrifice someone else to the crocodile, perhaps it won't eat you. Well, the punchline, the joke is that the crocodile will always eat you. It will just eat you last. And that's basically what happened in Minnesota. The political leadership tried to placate the mob, and in the end, it didn't work. In the end, the mob ate the leadership of Minnesota last. First, they tried to placate the mob by feeding it the Minnesota Police Department. That didn't work. And then they proceeded to consume the city. But as I said, that riot did not have to happen. Nope. So then you say, why did it happen? Because of dishonesty and propaganda. That's right. Because the official narrative was that George Floyd was murdered by a bunch of racist cops. So there's one small problem. He wasn't murdered. Then you say, what? No. Man wasn't murdered. In fact, the man was slowly dying from a drug overdose. Indeed, you could look it up. If you get the chance to get a hold of the actual autopsy report, yeah, the guy had about, if I remember correctly, I think 14 milligrams of fentanyl in his system, which is more than enough to kill a man, along with methamphetamines. And, wait for it, the man had 2 clogged arteries, which means his heart was a walking time bomb. Or as you used to say in Angola, down there in Louisiana, when they would warm up the electric chair, he was a dead man walking. He just didn't know it yet. So then you say, well, why are we opening up these old wounds? Well, recently a documentary was made. It was called The Death of Minnesota. And it was made by a local reporter. Well, technically, she's no longer a reporter because she said she retired from the business. But yeah. Yeah, Liz Collins. Yeah, in fact, her documentary was a book, basically a book, bookmark to a book that she wrote called "They're Lying: The Media, the Left, and the Death of George Floyd." And the documentary is available right now on Rumble. You can watch it. And it breaks down what happened to Mr. Floyd. And Mr. Floyd, as I said, he was no hero. No, he was no saint. and it shows what the news media never showed you, and that was the body cams of the officers. And it shows that the officers didn't beat up Mr. Floyd, didn't abuse him, never even used the N-word once. Nope. They were just trying to arrest him for passing funny money. And Mr. Floyd, to his own detriment, swallowed some methamphetamine laced with fentanyl. And of course, if you look at the film and see the body cams, you would see that Mr. Floyd was fighting the cops all the way, but then he started complaining that he couldn't breathe. So then the cops laid him on the ground, and remember, this man's under arrest, okay, so they just can't take the handcuffs off. But they soon realized the man was having problems, and they called in the paramedics. And the paramedics, they showed up promptly. But unfortunately, according to the body cams, the paramedics kind of, well, they kind of fumbled things. What can you say? Can't bat 1,000 every time. But, however, the political leadership of Minnesota, as well as the law enforcement leadership, the police chief, they totally fell down on the job. They did not do the town of Minnesota any favors. They embraced the fake narrative that George Floyd was a victim of a racist attack. Not true. And that he was murdered, which also wasn't true. But then it gets worse, because apparently the FBI stepped in. And then you say, what would they step in for? Good question. But apparently, according to Liz Collins, the FBI did a little fancy dance with the autopsy report. Why? Don't know. But they basically fixed it to make it look as though the man had been murdered instead of dying of a drug overdose. And then, of course, not only did the left-wing news media embrace that narrative, but then you had a bunch of opportunistic lowlifes and scumbags use the opportunity to go to the local Foot Locker, Target, and loot the places. Yep. And did the leadership of Minnesota stop the riots? Nope. They thought they could feed the crocodile. And indeed, they forced the police to abandon one of their precincts to the mob. Now, why on earth they do that for? I don't know. And indeed, in the documentary, the police lieutenant, she didn't know either. Nobody knew. And the only thing you conclude is that the political leadership thought they could just feed the beast, placate them, so they won't get angry. But didn't anyone ever tell these fools that you can't negotiate with a mob? And when I mean mob, I ain't talking about like Tony Soprano or Don Corleone. No, not that kind of mob. I'm talking about a whole thong of mindless zombies running around destroying and burning everything down. You can't negotiate with a mob. You can't placate a mob. The only thing you can do with a mob is put them down. Now, of course, not necessarily the Russians put down Bloody Sunday, but anyway. And these people who supposedly are in charge didn't do it. And in the process, their city got destroyed. Their law enforcement agency became demoralized, and a handful of very crafty, conniving leftist kooks won the day. Indeed, right now, if you go to Minnesota, you will find some place that calls it a self-proclaimed George Floyd Square. Except it's not really a square, it looks like a dump, complete with trash everywhere. And it's patrolled not by the regular police, it's controlled by Antifa. You know, those black masked knuckleheads? And you say, what the fuck are they doing there? Good question. No answers. And then, of course, if anyone was paying attention, those riots didn't stay in Minnesota. They spread all over the country. But only in left-wing cities. Why? Maybe because the leadership of these cities was cowardly and as incompetent as people in Minnesota? Yeah, that's a fair bet. But it was all based on a lie, a fraud. In fact, it's enough to make you want to cry. And when the George Floyd riots were over 30 people had died, and at least $2 billion in damages was done across multiple municipalities. And then you say, what was it all for? So some scumbags was able to get some free sneakers at the local Foot Locker. And some other knuckleheads got some free flat screen TVs from the local Target. But in the end, what was it all for? These cities, these blue cities run by Democratic or leftist mayors and city councils, their cities became impoverished because of those riots. Now, most of those political leaders are no longer running those towns. But the damage is done. In fact, you can go to Minnesota right now and see the vacant lots where all those businesses used to be at. Those businesses are gone, and they likely will not be coming back. And indeed, back during the '92 riots here in LA, there was a business at the end of the block here, a little convenience store, Don's and Jeans. I used to go in there when I was a kid. They used to have my favorite Adam Sour gum. Great gum. They don't make it anymore. But anyway, that business burned down to the '92 riots. And if you go out there right now, you know what you see there? A vacant lot. The business never came back. It's gone. And the people of Minnesota, they're going to be looking at a lot of vacant lots in their city for a very, very long time. And it just didn't have to be. All that death, all that destruction on a fib, a fairy tale, a fake narrative. Now, if there was any real justice in this world, that poor schmuck Chauvin, who got railroaded by the court system, he should be getting a presidential pardon and maybe some milk and cookies. because the guy did nothing wrong. He was just doing his job. And no, I ain't talking about doing his job the way Bull Connor used to do his job back in Alabama. No, I ain't talking about that kind of job. No, 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 no. Because this Derek Chauvin is no Bull Connor. He's just some ordinary working stiff just doing his job as a cop. He didn't murder this George Floyd. Because George Floyd was not murdered. George Floyd had agency. He chose to put those drugs in his mouth. He chose to swallow those drugs. And at that point, his fate was sealed. Yep. If you live in Minnesota, you truly understand what injustice is. And no, I don't mean what happened to George Floyd. That's not injustice. That's the result of living a poor and useless life. Injustice is having your city destroyed, and there was no one to point a finger at to say, you caused this. Because in the end, the people who destroyed Minneapolis was the people who lived there. They allowed a fake narrative to overwhelm, as Abraham Lincoln once said, the better angels of your nature. And you gave in to the fake narrative, and you destroyed your own city for a lie. Well, as one of the characters in the Blues Brothers once said, well, if the shit fits, wear it. And you people in Minnesota, you're definitely living in a world of shit. Well, that's all I have to say on that. And that's my opinion.